and Happy New Year, and welcome to Telford Wrekin Council's first Cabinet meeting of 2022. We are set up slightly differently today because of the COVID restrictions and also the rising cases of COVID both locally and nationally. So what we've got is a slightly different setup in the room, but also the Liberal Democrat leader, Bill Tomlinson, joining us virtually, as are a number of council officers who may be needed in the room, which is something we normally have them here physically, but they'll be beaming in. I just want to go to our Deputy Monitoring Officer, Richard Phillips, just to confirm that's all in order and complies with the legislation.
It does, Sean. All the decision makers are in the room and present today, so that does comply with the legislation.
That's lovely. Okay, thank you. Well, we've got a packed agenda, so other than to welcome Kelly Milton, our new cabinet member, in the room, and also to welcome all the other cabinet members to their new responsibilities, or the same responsibilities that you had before, we'll get on with the agenda. So just before I do that though, just advance notice that I'll be moving item 9, the Glebe Street Wellington report, from item 9 to item 10. I'll be declaring an interest as the council's nominee to the Wrekin Housing Group, and I'll leave the room at that point, and I'll leave you to do that report with Lee in the chair. So apologies for absence. I think we've got one, which is Councillor Richard Overton, due to care and responsibilities.
Other than that, no others received. That's
lovely, thank you. Declarations of interest, other than the one that I've just declared. Any other declarations of interest? No. Item 3 then are the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to sign those as a true record? Yeah. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you very much. Item 4 then, leaders' announcements. I won't say any more than I've already said, given we've got a packed agenda in front of us today. Item 5 is the 2021-22 financial monitoring report. Councillor Ray Evans.
Thank you, Leader. The Council continues to see additional demands and increasing costs for many services, with the greatest pressures occurring in adult social care and children's safeguarding. Projected outturn position is currently expected to be over budget by just over £1 million at the year end, which is a deterioration of £560,000 compared to the position reported to Cabinet in November. This is made up of service pressures of £5.2 million and £1 million anticipated funding shortfall relating to business rates, against which £5.2 million of the Council's emergency response funding allocation will be applied. After covering this shortfall, the current projection is that there will be 2.8 million left in the contingency fund at the year end. With regard to capital spend, at the time of compiling the report, projected capital expenditure was 88% of the budget allocation. Some further slippage is anticipated in future years. Members, you're asked to approve the recommendations at section 2 of the report.
Thank you, Ray. And just for people at home watching, this isn't the budget report, that's next, but this is just a financial monitoring report. Are there any questions on the financial monitoring report? Councillor Tomlinson.
Yeah, just it's still welcome that we've got this financial robustness in the authority, that we're managing to stick with our contingency, stick within the contingency that we've got, with all the uncertainties that are going on. So a big thank you to all the council staff.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Dugmore.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, so, and it's good, this state in this time in the financial year is what it is. I mean, without the government COVID grant, we'd be in a far worse situation. So it's very good, and congratulations to Ken.
Thank you. I'd like to congratulate all the cabinet members as well, Nigel, for all the work that they do year in, year out over the last decade. And what a stark contrast we have with just over the Borough and Shropshire Council, who are in an absolute mess, simply because they've not planned for the future, they've not taken difficult decisions, they've got a structural deficit of tens of millions of pounds, and that's the direct contrast that's available for residents in Telford Wrekin. A Labour-controlled council, the lowest council tax in the Midlands, financially sound, delivering high-quality, outstanding and exceptional services, and a Shropshire Council controlled by Conservatives at the bottom end of the M54, roads crumbling, structural deficit, highest council tax in the county, rising it by almost 4%, and what a mess they are in. And I've got to say on this thing that you keep going on about, Nigel, around the COVID government grants, the two things I say is, one, it's not the government's money, it's our money, taxpayers' money, that we're getting back. £130 million of government grants have been cut from this council, and you are praising and celebrating a £15 million grant from the government. And let me also just say that I know that there are many people that have done very well out of the COVID pandemic, new income streams being created for lots of people having windfalls that they weren't expecting. But actually, the grants that were made available to local government was compensation for income that we lost, and compensation for the higher costs of PPE, the higher costs of testing, diverting staff to help the national effort. So I don't understand quite how anyone's celebrating a compensation grant as if it's some type of new money. It was a compensation grant to replace money that we had to spend, and actually it wasn't even enough to replace the money that we lost as a result of the pandemic, despite the fact that the Chancellor of the sorry, Nigel, I listened to you very carefully when you were speaking. Please listen to me. Despite the fact that the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, and the local government secretary at the time, and all the Conservative MPs in the county at the time said that they would do all that they asked councils to do all that they could, that the money would not be an issue. And what do we find? The same old story, being shortchanged by this government in the tune of millions of pounds, because the compensation grant did not make up for the money that we lost as a council, not just this council, but every council from down the country. So I'd hope a bit of humility from the Conservatives in Telford Wrekin, especially given the record of their party of running councils in this county and this region. That's been moved and seconded. Everybody in favour? That's everybody, thank you. We move on to item 6 then, which is the medium-term financial strategy, 22, 23, 25, 26, which is also known as the budget. Right.
Thank you. Cabinet before you is the Council's draft medium-term financial strategy. As a large, complex organisation delivering many services, we need to plan our finances over a medium-term period, and therefore this report sets out our strategy for the coming 4 years to 25-26. A strategy that prioritises projecting frontline services by continually looking for ways to make savings, by providing services differently, and by generating income. However, you should note that for the 4th year running, this government has only provided a 1-year settlement, so projections beyond next year can only remain indicative. In spite of the severe financial constraints that have been applied to local authorities during a prolonged period of austerity and the increased demand for key services, particularly in adult social care and children's safeguarding, which have necessitated very active budget management and financial controls, this council has demonstrated a consistently strong track record of sound financial management. Telford Wrekin Council has the lowest level of council tax across the whole of the Midlands region, with the average council tax in the Midlands being more than 13% higher than that of our borough. While this council continues to face increasing demands for many services, including adult social care, as elected representatives, we are also acutely aware of the many and increasing pressures our residents are also facing. Rising taxes, an increase in national insurance contributions, and unprecedented rising food and energy costs. Cabinet, despite the government assuming that their comprehensive spending review that all councils responsible for delivering adult social care services will implement a 2% general council tax increase plus a 1% adult social care precept, Telford Wrekin Council have put residents first and are committing to a 2-year freeze in the level of our general council tax at 0. And given the increasing pressures on this area, will only apply the government's assumed 1% for adult social care precept. Due to our sustained effective financial management, this council is also able and proposing to make a number of significant investments to the future and to further protect, care and invest in our borough. These will include 660,000 to children's safeguarding next year, and almost 7 million to adult social care by 23-24. That's a total commitment to these two key areas of over £90 million, equivalent to 65% of this council's net revenue budget. Furthermore, we will invest an additional 20 million into New Place, bringing the total investment up to 131 million, and there will be 10 million for affordable housing initiatives. We will create a £20 million capital investment fund that will enable one-off investments in a range of corporate priorities, and a further 37 million additional investment will be made in the growth fund to project the existing jobs in the borough and to attract new jobs through inward investment. 35 million has been set aside for transport and highway schemes, and 9.5 million for climate change initiatives and environmental improvements. Since 2009, this council has delivered savings totalling £134 million through its sound financial management. This report also puts forward new proposals that will deliver further and ongoing savings of almost £144 million by 2024. However, despite having to make these significant budget savings, we will continue to be committed to ensuring that we use our remaining revenue and capital resources to deliver the greatest possible benefit for our local people. As an administration, we care deeply about and have consistently said that we will continue to protect the most vulnerable in our society and prioritise the protection of services to vulnerable adults and children in our community. This is a budget for our residents who, in this coming year, will face enormous challenges with escalating fuel and food bills, rising taxes and freezes in benefits. Cabinet, we are a compassionate council. We are a well-managed council. We are a council that is on the side of our residents. And that's why at this time of unprecedented pressures, we are proposing to take the unprecedented step of committing to a 0% increase in our general council tax for the next 2 years. I invite you to approve the recommendations at item 2 of the report.
Councillor Rowlands, thank you very much. Is that seconded? Thank you very much, Lee. Are there questions or comments from the members of the Cabinet, please? Paul?
Yeah, welcome this report. It's as always, great to get such a positive report from our finance team, and thank you to the finance team and everybody who works in that team, because they work so hard at making our jobs easier, and I want them to know that. Can I say it's typical, isn't it? We are here looking at a 0% rise on our council tax, when we just have to look across the border and it's a 4% rise over there. What does that tell you about our position and what we've done? I think it tells us a lot. The government were going to sort out adult social care, so they said. They had a green paper that's still a green paper, is it not? And still hasn't moved forward very far. And what is their answer to the adult social care problem? Ensuring that we tax people more. The government is taxing people more for adult social care here. That's what we would say. We would want a 0% across the board here, and we can't do that because the government is saying put 1% on for adult social care. Now, I think the government's got a lot to answer in terms of those issues. We need to see that sorted. We need to see the right kind of support to local government. The LGA is very clear, I think, on what's needed. I think the government needs to be clear on what's needed, and we need to get the support we need to ensure that our most vulnerable people in this town are looked after properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watling. Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Leader. I welcome this budget. Throughout what's been a very difficult decade of cuts, our administration has continued to protect, care and invest in our borough and our residents. Having to plan without any long-term settlement from the government has been more than challenging. But in spite of this and the sweeping cuts, we'll continue to invest in services. I'll just look at my own portfolio, and again this year we're allocating new investment into children's safeguarding, a further 667,000 next year. We're also increasing investment in adult social care. This is the difference a Labour council makes. It's deeds, not words, protecting the most vulnerable. The excellent provision in both adults and children's services have been recognised as being outstanding because of the continued investment of this administration. Again, deeds, not words. We also continue to invest. The capital programme contains 24.3 million in education capital projects, continued investment in our school expansion projects to increase pupil places. Again, deeds, not words. Our administration has ensured a very steady hand to steer the ship through very choppy waters. Through financial prudence and sound investments, we've been able to ensure we can deliver the lowest council tax in the whole of the West Midlands while still delivering excellent services. And this isn't just my judgment, this is the judgment of our residents in the recent survey, and it's certainly not replicated by some of our neighbours. The government just assumes all councils will increase council tax to the maximum permitted in an effort to prop up their underfunding, and particularly in adult social care, the funding which is not only woefully inadequate, but is unfair on our residents. I'm proud of the work of this administration. We're creating a better borough, one that residents can live, work and raise a family, safe in the knowledge that a Labour council will continue to protect, care and invest in them. Thank you to all of our officers, to Ken and all of his team, to Councillor Ray Evans and Councillor Lee Carter before her, because this has been a long-term effort to get to where we are. It is their dedication and hard work that has produced such a sound budget, even in the face of very severe cuts of over 130 million. So thank you, Team Telford.
Andy Burford.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I welcome this budget as well. It's a demonstration, as people have already said, of our commitment to our residents. Going on talking about adult social care, and let's be clear, despite the plan to fix it, it isn't fixed. I've said this in full council, and I'll say it again here. The monies that have been allocated, first of all, are being raised in an unfair way through the National Insurance Levy, and secondly, they're being targeted at only one aspect of a broken system, and that is the cap on contributions to care over a person's lifetime. What they don't address is the most important issue of all, which is the front line, the pay, the terms and conditions of staff, the staffing crisis, the need for a long-term plan to fix those issues is not there, and we look across the country and we see a broken system. This council is doing everything it can within its means to address that deficit. It can't address it all, but because of our sound financial management, as Councillor Evans has said, we are able to do enough to keep our system here working and providing for our residents, and that's a testimony to the strength of this council and the way it's run, I think. We still desperately need that plan from government. I'm not going to hold my breath, I have to say. It still isn't there in terms of how this social care system will continue to operate. So we've had to put the 1% on. We have no choice in doing that. It's a small amount towards the amounts we're already investing as a council, but we continue to wish and hope and pray for some kind of government action to allow us to plan properly in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Healy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. The graph in 5.3 is really stark, isn't it? The government talks about levelling up, but actually this increasing reliance on council tax for the funding of local services, I would argue, actually increases inequalities. Boroughs like ours with a higher number of lower banded properties, if we raise council tax, then the amount that's raised obviously is lower compared to more affluent areas. And actually it's in areas like ours with those lower income families that actually have a greater reliance on council services. So, you know, this to me just exacerbates inequality, certainly doesn't level up at all, and that feels like that's the government's strategy, isn't about levelling up, it's words, as Councillor Reynolds has said, and rather than deeds. And often, obviously, the residents in areas like ours who are on lower incomes will feel that squeeze, feel that any rise in council tax much more strongly. Of course, we all still pay our other taxes direct to government, you know, our income tax, our national insurance, which is going up, VAT, all those other taxes go to central government, but much less of it is coming back out to the regions and back out to local authority areas. And I just wonder, where does the money go? Because it doesn't feel like it's making improvements to health, education, even defence. You know, we've shown recently that spending on defence has gone down. So, you know, where is that all that money that is our money? It's money that we raise, we pay into the system, and it just feels incredibly unfair. So, you know, I do support this budget. It poses some difficulties for us in terms of freezing council tax, but I do think it's the right thing to do for our residents who are facing a real cost of living crisis. I want to, like as others have said, thank my colleagues and also all the staff for all their innovation and hard work to be able to invest in those revenue generating projects so that we are able to meet the needs of our residents through things like new place, providing housing, but also then have a revenue stream that helps fund those crucial frontline services. And I think that's very clear. That's the difference between us and our neighbouring authorities. Thank you.
Lee Carter.
Thank you. I welcome this budget. Positive, but more importantly robust. I think Councillor Tomlinson mentioned that in the earlier report. The most important thing in any budget is that it's robust, and for the 11th year it is robust. First of all, it continues to deal with a financial crisis that's been foisted upon us by Conservative governments over the last 10 years. We've heard talk today about we would be in crisis if it hadn't been for grants given by government. Well, I actually think we're not in crisis because we've ignored everything that the Conservative opposition has said in Telford and Wrekin over a decade. We've ignored their criticism, their opposition, the way they've derided a lot of the things that we've done to make sure that we can generate income to protect frontline services, but also maintain a positive vision and outlook for the borough. I'm of course massively in favour of the council tax freeze, the core council tax freeze. There's a financial crisis that's going to hit many households, as Councillor Healy outlined, and we're doing our bit here as much as we possibly can to help ease that pressure on households. The deal has always been from this council, you know, threefold. We need to raise money from external sources, but more importantly from new income generation, but also savings that we make. And I think what we're saying this time is that deal's changed a little bit. We understand we've got to continue to be efficient and make those savings, but actually we've got to put more onus on generating new external income because of that financial crisis that's facing households. Therefore, we're freezing council tax. And the message is quite clear to residents in Telford and Wrekin. Actually, the primary increase in your bill this year has been dreamt up in Downing Street by Johnson and Sunak. It's been endorsed by Pritchard and Allen, and it will be delivered through your letterboxes in March. That is the increase. That's where it's come from. That is what will hit you. And we're doing our bit to make sure that the bit that's within our control that we freeze. In terms of my specific portfolio area, of course, I welcome the 35 million continued investment into highways, not just highways though, footpaths right across the borough, continuation of the programmes that we've seen right across in every neighbourhood, but specifically in areas like Aqueduct, Sutton Hill, the Nedge. We'll continue investing in those areas. New cycleways, investment into the Silking Way, investment into new street lighting, into our major roads to ensure that this growth that we will continue to see over the next few years, the infrastructure can cope with that and manage that. Basically, improvements and enhancements to every single neighbourhood. I welcome the 2.1 million that's earmarked for stalled sites. We've probably all across our respective wards, across the chamber, have got stalled sites in our wards. And again, this is our attempt to try and deal with them and really unlock those sites and ensure that brownfield sites are brought forward for development. And whilst it's not in my portfolio area, I know Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Burford have said about the near £7 million investment into adult and children's services, which is welcome. You know, we've always made that promise that we will continue to invest as much as we possibly can to protect the most vulnerable in our communities. And I think it's an absolute damning indictment on the Conservative opposition. For 10 years, you have voted against every single new penny into children's services and adult services in our budget. But I welcome this fantastic work from the finance officer and all of the team, the whole team at Telford and Wrekin, who've once again managed to defy the odds in terms of our finances.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I welcome this budget also, and thanks to officers and cabinet members for all of the work on this. A lot of this has been said, but you know, it is down to the same financial management of this council. That's what's allowed us to continue to support our residents, and that's what's allowed us to invest in our borough in spite of 10 years of cuts and 130 million cut from budgets. Increasing pressure on adult social care and children's safeguarding, it's been said, but you know, it can't be overstated. This budget will make a positive difference to our residents, and that's what we're here for. Many of them are facing uncertain and worrying times themselves, so you know, we must put our residents first always. I'm really pleased to see that things like affordable housing, employment and investment into things like leisure and culture, including 3 million into our playing pitches, which is really welcomed. You know, this isn't possible because of a COVID relief grant. This is possible because this council made effective and good decisions of managing the council finances over the last 10 years, and that's because of the officers and the cabinet members and the council. So I welcome this report.
Thank you. We are a council on our resident side, and everything we do is with that central mission at its heart. And we have been, as already has been said, we've had the lowest council tax in the Midlands for the best part of 12 years now. So the opposition voices that I hear that this council tax freeze is somehow an election-winning initiative is for the birds. We've kept council tax at the lowest levels in the whole of the Midlands, lower than Conservative-controlled Stoke, lower than Conservative-controlled Shropshire, lower than Conservative-controlled Dudley, lower than Conservative-controlled Walsall, lower than every council in the Midlands, because we are a council on people's side, and we understand that for the vast majority of people, the council tax bill, after their rent or their mortgage, is the second largest bill that comes out of their bank account each and every month. So we've kept council tax as low as we can, and this extra measure for this year and next, probably the only council in the country to be declaring a 2-year general council tax freeze for 2 years, is because we are on the side of our residents. And what a contrast, not only to Conservative-controlled Shropshire Council, but the government. We've now got the highest tax burden in this country since the 1950s. We were told that the national insurance increase to be paid by every worker and every employer in the country, and therefore in Telford and Wrekin, would go to fix adult social care for the birds. That's why people are paying twice. They're paying through their pay packet, and they're paying on their council tax bill. And let me be very clear, if it was the fact that the government had come forward with a real plan to deal with adult social care and remove the adult social care precept from the council tax bill, as they said they would if national insurance went up, then we would be in a position where not a penny more would be raised through Telford and Wrekin Council's tax lines on your council tax bill. So it's a very direct contrast. And at the same time, we've kept car park charges down to a minimum where they exist, and for the bulk of car parks in this borough, car parking is free. What a contrast! I was in Shrewsbury the other day, £6.70 to park for a couple of hours in Shrewsbury town centre. The direct contrast between a Labour-controlled council and a Conservative-controlled council in this county could not be clearer. A green tax for many councils, putting a charge on the collection of green waste. We haven't done that in Telford and Wrekin. We've kept that service for free. We've invested in street lighting. We've invested in safety initiatives. We now pay, despite the fact that Telford and Wrekin Council residents send around £100 million a year to Whitehall through road tax, We now spend more money as a council on road maintenance than the government give us back in Department for Transport grants. That's the contrast for residents to see. And the other contrast, which is less academic, I suppose, is the contrast between the 4 years that the Conservatives ran this council, when they had double-digit increases of council tax rises over the 4-year period, and under a Labour government received more money from government each and every year, not dealing with cuts. This is not about Labour and Conservative in many ways, it's about local and national. And locally we are on your side against a Tory government that is not. A Tory government that is imposing more tax rises than ever before, but giving less back to our residents, as has been mentioned. This is a budget we should all be proud of. I do hope for the first time in almost 12 years, that we receive unanimous support in the council chamber for this budget. The Liberal Democrats didn't vote for this budget, our budget last year. The Conservatives didn't vote for the budget for the last decade. And now is the time that they both stood on the side of our residents, joined the Labour Party in Telford Wrekin, and said to Telford Wrekin residents, this is a council that you can be proud of. That's been moved and seconded. Are there questions from the opposition leaders? I'll share them in. Councillor Tomlinson?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think the thing that comes to my mind is plan, or the lack of plan. Not for the local authority, but for the government. We've seen this in all manner of ways in which they treat everything. It's all knee-jerk, it's all panic, it's all lack of tag package, and it's not done with the best interest of everyone. This council officer, they've had to work with information that they only received on the 16th of December to try and put our budget together for next year. They haven't been given any indication whatsoever of what the outcome is going to look like for the year after that or the year after that. We've got, well, there's over 6,000 employees or more, and we have to plan and we have to know where we're going, and we're not given any steer until virtually the last minute. I mean, to that end, the budget papers only came out a day or so, and I wasn't able to have more briefing, and so I haven't been able to see in complete detail all the budget proposals and talk them through. But the officers are very kindly offered to go through that with me, and I shall do that, following this meeting. So, how can you plan? They know, they've already raised and going to raise the national living wage, which is absolutely laudable, in April, which I think gives a pay increase to people on the lowest end of the scale of around 6%. 6%. Most people that work in the care system are on those sorts of salaries, and yet they've not provided a penny extra, hardly anything extra, to support that sector. It's like they're not even thinking it through. It's just legislation. So, once on the whole, looking at the executive summaries that I've seen for this budget, I welcome it, particularly with regards to the freeze on the general increase in taxation, council taxation. Though obviously the 1% is required to try and fund adult social services until we get a paper or some indication from the government that they're going to realise that adult social care shouldn't be down to local taxpayers to come in, particularly in poverty areas, as Councillor Healy said. It's the general taxation, and it's a scandal that they're putting up national insurance and are not giving any money into the care system direct. I do welcome this budget overall. I hope, Sean, I will be able to put my arm around you at some stage or other, the League Dem and our group and the rest of the Cabinet, not upset you by voting against the budget, but until I've spoken to my colleagues and we've gone through it in detail, I can't give you that guarantee just yet. But I am looking upon it favourably, and I do welcome the fact that we are putting council tax up, particularly in these real stringent needs. It's knee-jerk reaction of the government. It does get its comeuppance occasionally. People may remember the result we had in North Shropshire, where people weren't very chuffed, shall we just say, with the way the government are handling everything. And that's the thing that they'll get, and this is what they'll get from budgets. The one small thing, which I haven't been able to see in the papers, I'll ask the Cabinet member accordingly, which was a request I made last year, is that where we're still having to apply the 1% reset, if they can make an allowance for those that are on the council discount scheme and make it complete freeze for those small number of people, it would make a big difference to them not having any council tax support at all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill. Nigel?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't realise I was responsible for Shropshire Council's finances. Anyway.
Go for it.
Well, I never seen them. I have no contact with them. So, I mean, the thing is, though, if the
What about confidence?
just to come back onto the grants. I mean, if we're running currently a budget surplus of £3 million, well, then without £15 million, we'd be running a £12 million deficit. Right. But anyway, getting on to this budget. I mean, like Bill, I have had a brief briefing, but that was in less than 24 hours after I'd seen the details. So a bit like Bill, I can't really comment on it line by line at this particular moment. However, I am delighted to see that there's going to be zero council tax, and I'm fully supportive of that, because that's exactly what I would be doing. Last year, though, the council tax was put up unnecessarily high, and we did argue for that and say we could have phased in the increases. So it's all well and good going on.
So you'd have an increase this year?
We've got hard-pressed households, but obviously they're more hard-pressed than they needed to be. Now, the other thing is that on the a 1% council tax is approximately £750,000. Right? Now then, this budget will increases council borrowing by £97 million. So therefore, a 1% increase in council tax is equivalent to 0.8% of the borrowing that's in this budget. So therefore, why the hell don't you use some of that borrowing and actually pay for the social care precept of 1% and give it completely zero to
Oh dear God. Right, thanks Nigel. So thank you Bill, we look forward to hopefully your support this year. We did miss it last year. I know you don't like to mention the fact that you didn't support it last year, but you didn't, and there was lots of things in that budget that we ought to have agreed on. I'll come back to Ray on some of the specific questions around that's been raised, but I just wanted to just take on head on the two direct criticisms of the leader of the opposition. The first thing to say is that on the one hand he welcomes the council tax freeze this year, but last year wanted to phase council tax over a number of years, which would have included this year. So if we had followed the advice of the leader of the opposition last year, we would be increasing council tax this year and not having a council tax freeze. Point number one. Point number two, this obsession, this absolute obsession from the Conservatives about borrowing is why Shropshire Council are in such a mess now and Telford Wrekin Council are in such a good position now. Two reasons for that. The first reason is that when we borrow as a council, we borrow to invest. We borrow money in order to make money. We borrow money to buy assets. So the assets of this council, Nigel, is almost £1 billion of assets that this council own. So for residents who may be taking an interest in this, the way I describe it is a bit like your house mortgage, your loan to value. How much money is your house worth and how much is your mortgage on your house? And everyone knows that if you have a good loan to value, you're doing quite well. The loan to value, if you want to use that comparative for this council, is around 60%. So for every asset that we own, we have more than almost twice as much. Sorry, forgive me, the other way around. For every pound of borrowing we have almost £2 to £3 worth of assets to cover that. And unlike your household that you live in, our assets generate income each and every year. They provide money from for the council to stack up its services. In direct contrast to the £130 million that the government is taking away from councils each and every year. And this illiterate, and it is illiterate, statement that you reduce borrowing, which is a one-off amount of money, to replace a revenue cost, Nigel, you're better than that. You're better than that. You did. You just said, but reduce. You just said reduce. These are recorded meetings, as you know. These are recorded meetings. These are recorded meetings. Nigel, I will ask you to leave the meeting if you continue to interrupt. You said words to the effect that you reduced the borrowing in order to offset the adult social care precept. That's what you just said. But you know full well that an adult social care precept is a revenue raiser each and every year. Borrowing is one-off. So you can't. It's not as simple. It's not as simple as that. And residents will see through these tricks and this con that you make. And the problem you've got, Nigel, you might not talk to your Conservative colleagues, or your Conservative colleagues might not talk to you in Shropshire and elsewhere. But every council in the region, Conservative controlled, will be raising the adult social care precept, and they will be raising council tax to the extent of 3 to 4%. And you have a very clear question to answer to residents of Telford Wrekin. Why is a Labour-controlled council in Telford Wrekin able to freeze general council taxation, ignoring the government's instruction, when Conservative councils cannot? And it's because of the sound financial management, the tough decisions that we've made over the last 12 years, and the income generation that your party has opposed each and every time. From LED street lighting, do you remember when we spent the investment on LED street lighting? Opposed by the Conservatives, that is now saving this council hundreds of thousands of pounds each and every year. New Place. Remember when the Conservatives opposed New Place and wanted to sell it off? Over 1,000 residents in Telford Wrekin now live in a New Place home, and that's good for them and it's good for us, but it's also income generating for the council. The alternative, the last time I had an alternative opposition budget from the Conservatives, they wanted to sell off New Place. The solar farm. Remember when we did the solar farm, opposed by the Conservatives because the sun may not shine all of the time, was the statement we had for the Conservatives. Now, good for the environment and raising hundreds of thousands of pounds for council finance. The reality is, Nigel, you and your party in Telford and Wrekin have been on the wrong side of every single significant decision that this council's made over the last 12 years. And the previous 4 years, when you and your party were in control of this council, you hiked council tax left, right and centre, and you were borrowing money like it was running out of fashion on things that did not return a penny of investment back to this council. And the contrast is clear, your record is clear, and I hope that Telford and Wrekin residents never trust this council with the Conservatives again. Councillor Evans, Councillor Evans, Councillor Tomlinson asked a specific question around council tax support and whether or not we'll be continuing that.
We are looking. We have two funds, in fact, that we're looking into how we can use those to support those really in the hardest amount of need. So that we're currently looking at that funding and how we can allocate that. So I hope that reassures you. If I may also, Leader, take this opportunity to just remind people that this document is now out to consultation. We've got public consultation, we've got a couple of online meetings with parish councils, voluntary sector and businesses, and the document will also go through scrutiny. And I would encourage those people who have an interest in this to make comments.
Can I just say before we close on this that it's really important that residents understand how their council tax bill is made up. So what we are saying very clearly today is that the general council tax element of the bill we want to freeze, subject to consultation. The government's adult social care precept would go up by 1%, and that's a separate line on the council tax bill. The other elements of the council tax bill are the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Fire Authority and your parish and town council. Clearly, this council has no control whatsoever on those three elements. But I do hope that we do see the same amount of discipline and constraint from those people who levy council tax on those. So my direct plea to John Campion, and this is your moment now, Nigel. You can influence some of your Conservatives in the county. John Campion, Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner, please do not levy more council tax increase on the residents of Telford Wrekin. They simply can't afford it. And I hope that Eric Carter, the chairman of the Fire Authority here in Shropshire and Telford Wrekin, and also a Conservative councillor in Telford Wrekin, will listen to this argument and not increase disproportionately the council tax for the Fire Authority. And I do hope that parish and town councils also look at what ways in which they can support residents too. And I look forward to seeing those organisations come forward and say how they're helping residents in Telford Wrekin, because we can do our bit, but we do need the other parties on the bill to do their bit, and we'll be looking at ways in which we can write to and lobby those individuals in the coming weeks and months to come. But I hope residents do get involved in the consultation. That has been moved. It's been seconded. A good debate. It's now out for consultation. All those in favour? Thanks, everybody. Thank you. We now then move to the school funding formula for 22-23. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. The report received for you today concerns the annual dedicated schools grant. It's allocated to local authorities by the Department of Education, and this is for the 4 blocks: high needs, early years, central schools, and the basic schools block. Schools block is calculated using the number of pupils preceding October census and is different for each local authority. Our allocation for 22-23 is approximately 143 million. High needs block uses a combination of historic allocations and national funding formula. Ours for 22-23 is 30.5 million. The early years block is calculated using average pupils, the relevant to January censuses, then multiplying it by a unit of funding. Again, for 22-23, we're receiving 13 million. The central school services block is calculated on historic expenditure levels and the number of pupils. It was a grant that was introduced in 2018-19, replacing the education services grant, but sadly at a much reduced level. Our allocation for 22-23 is 1.1 million. Now, whilst funding is always welcome, this has to be considered in context. And I ask you to note with great concern that the report also details the Department of Education Schools Improvement, Monitoring and Brokering grant for maintained schools, which is being removed. Nationally, this amounts to a cut of 50 million to education for maintained schools, with academies not being affected. It is proposed that half of this grant is to be removed in 22-23 and the remaining half will be removed in 23-24. No alternative funding is being provided. To Telford and Wrekin, this represents to us a cut of 182,000. Now, but we still have a statutory duty, so the government is removing the funding to deliver that statutory duty. Furthermore, we will have to ask our maintained schools to de-delegate funding for statutory school improvement functions, just for maintained schools. This is nothing more than a cut to education funding for maintained schools. And this really is a very bitter blow. It feels like a slap in the face, given the support that both the local authority and our schools have given to the Department of Education during the pandemic. Does this empower our education system to be the best that it can for all Telford's children, which is our collective ambition? The high needs funding is increased, but sadly it does not remove the pressures on our budget and the increase in demand and pressures on budget, which is being felt by local authorities across the country. And I urge the government to address this. Our administration continues to deliver the most effective and cost-efficient provision possible. But like others, we are dealing with fundamental pressures in what to a large extent is a demand-led system. The funding formula for 22-23 is again using the national funding formula. This is a revised method which benefited Telford and Wrekin schools with an increase in 2017-18 and 2021 of around 6.8% per pupil. And obviously I'm very pleased for our schools that we have had that increase, but really that just vindicated our long-standing belief that the mainstream funding for schools in Telford and Wrekin had previously been kept at an unacceptable low level by the Department of Education. The increase for 22-23 is less than 3% per pupil, and it still only puts Telford and Wrekin's main funding stream around, for per pupil, midpoint national. Since 2021, local authorities have been required to apply a minimum funding per pupil. For 22-23, this has been set at 4,265 for each primary child and 5,527 for the secondary schools. This has an impact in boosting the funding of schools with a less deprived intake, as these schools will receive little funding from factors linked to deprivation and lower prior attainment. This obviously has an effect on some of our schools. It should be noted that funding for our schools is also affected by the amount allocated to growth funding. In Telford Wrekin, our schools continue to grow as planned, and we will ensure that our schools will not be disadvantaged. Our schools, part of the expansion programme, we will be increasing their school pupil numbers, and this will be funded straight away by our administration. We will not be using we will use estimated pupil numbers immediately, rather than following the government formula where the schools will have to wait until the following April for an academy, or the following September, following April for maintained, following September for academy to get their refunded. That is not fair on our schools. If our schools have got pupils now, they need that money now. So whilst the minimum funding guarantee is allocated by the Department of Education, and they're setting a minimum increase of 0.5% per pupil, our administration, we are actually going to offer our local minimum funding guarantee of 2% per pupil. So we will be offering more per protection for our schools than what's being offered nationally. We want to ensure that all children across Telford and Wrekin receive a fair protected settlement, and that no school will get a decrease in their funding. I therefore recommend this report to Cabinet, and I want to thank all the officers for their hard work on this. We will be ensuring that all the children across our borough will continue to receive better funding by the minimum funding guarantee, and this will prevent any year-on-year reduction in funding and offers more protection that we are definitely seeing nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Watling. Any questions or comments from Cabinet members on this report? No? Are there comments or questions from the group leaders?
Very good briefings.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Tomlinson?
Thank you, Leader. I think it's worthwhile remembering with the school funding formula, and many residents possibly aren't aware of this, that the majority of the funding comes from local government, and we simply act as a passport. We pass it on to the school in terms of the fact that we had the item earlier, which is looking at the medium-term financial strategy, and very little of what this does affects our budget. It's straight in and much straight out. We do keep a small core of funding to oversee the schools in our area. It's also worth reminding residents that those that are in a trust status typically get we have very little influence over those schools at all. Putting that point aside for the time being, though, I'd like to welcome, as the Cabinet member has, the fact the government finally woken up after all these years and brought the funding that these have up to at least the minimum that's nationally required, or pretty close to that. We've been lagging behind that ever since, I think I've been on the authority now for 25 years, and we've been lagging behind national funding, so that's welcome. I think the other point I'd like to make, and I'll on the hearings, is that the fact that they're only allowing funding to grow by around 2% across all schools, and we all know the cost pressures, wage pressures, heating bills, everything which will affect all these schools. I think for a lot of schools it's going to be a real cut to their funding when all the costs are taken into account. Again, we're coming up against where the government is looking for education across the area, possibly end up with a real cut in funding when inflation is taken into account. The one thing I do like about school funding formula is that they are nationally reviewed, and therefore the government they look at what should be a national minimum, along with the living pupil premium for deprived areas. That's also that we have for education. It's precisely what we thought about the basis of adult and children's social care. They should be looking at the element of deprivation and deciding what should be the minimum funding in areas, and not just relying on council taxpayers to stump up the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Should you want to come back on that?
No, I mean, I think I totally agree with everything you said there, Bill. We are only benefiting now because of the massive underfunding we've had for years. And even though we've had this extra increase over the last few years of 6.8%, it's still only putting us about midway in the table. And the national minimum funding formula, the way it's working at the moment, if we're being really brutally honest, is benefiting the schools that are in the leafy shires, because it doesn't include the deprivation element within there, the low attainment that's in there, and that's the very element of children who we need that extra funding. They talk about the levelling up agenda. This is again showing me where, no, we're not levelling up actually. The very areas that need that extra support to put that extra investment in education aren't actually getting it. And this extra cut, which has been really by stealth, £182,000 from education within Telford Wrekin, I personally think is absolutely unacceptable, and I'd like to see my colleagues across the floor actually lobbying their government and saying, why on earth are we? They keep saying children need extra support, we've had a pandemic, they've been out of schools, so what should we do? Let's cut the funding to schools in our local authorities by 182,000. That is really helping. That's helping on the levelling up agenda. That's putting extra support into our classrooms. I think not. So I really would welcome support from colleagues across the floor to lobby the government and say, let's fund education fairly. And in fact, to support it fairly, there are areas across the country where the deprivation levels and the low attainment levels mean they need more. They don't need the same straight formula that's benefiting our leafy shires. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Again, a very good discussion. Thank you for your questions. It's been moved, it's been seconded. Everybody in favour? That's everybody, thank you. And we'll now move over to item 8, which is supported and specialist housing. Councillor Andy Burford.
Thank you, Leader. I think we're all aware of the demographic trends indicating the rise in the numbers of older and more vulnerable people in our communities. I mean, actually, and it sometimes gets to me, this is perhaps because of my age, but actually this is good news as long as we resource, we plan and manage properly. Things that are conspicuously lacking nationally, I might say, at the moment. I believe that there are two things that are crucial to enabling us to deliver on what everyone agrees we want, which is people living as independently as possible in their own homes and in their own mixed and balanced communities, thereby incidentally relieving the pressure on the NHS and on residential care. It's a win-win if you can achieve that. The first thing of those two critical things is a properly paid, trained and supported social care workforce, of which I'm not going to speak anymore. We've already talked about that. The second is housing that is fit for purpose. This supplementary planning document addresses the second of those critical issues. It's effectively an evidence base that will inform developers and drive delivery of the types and numbers and locations of homes that our older and more vulnerable residents will need in the future. The document provides clarity about the need for accessible, supported and specialist housing, building standards, location and design, and importantly, how the council will work in partnership with developers. It's important to remember that we're not just talking about older people here, we're talking about adults with learning difficulties, about adults with physical difficulties, disabilities rather, mental health needs, vulnerable young people, homeless. All those are categories which are covered within this document. I'm pleased to say that this council is one of the first to adopt a comprehensive planning document of this kind. We're already leading on delivery of innovative housing initiatives, such as the intergenerational community at Donington Wood, New Place itself, extra care, provision. On affordable homes, we've a particularly strong record with 300 on average per annum, and a third of all new houses being affordable homes. That's a strong record. But of course, all local councils have limits to what they can achieve by themselves. We need government's long-term planning and commitment. Power 5.6 in this report talks about the government's white paper and the relatively small amounts of money to deliver on the principle of every decision about care being a decision about housing. More is required if we're going to afford the transformation needed. In Power 5.7, we're still awaiting the outcome of the government's consultation on raising accessibility standards, which concluded in September. Why the delay? Meanwhile, more houses are being built without the higher, what we call M42 standards applying. Why is it that this government won't take timely decisions on this? It's the same with the delayed implementation of net zero carbon emissions for new homes, not until 2025. Why can't they act now? Could it be that they're too afraid to upset the building industry? It's really just not good enough. However, while the government is palpably not doing what it takes, this council is doing what it can. It's getting ahead of the game and as far as possible on the housing needs of our communities. This supplementary planning document is yet another example of that, and I commend it to you and recommend its approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Is that seconded? Thank you, Shirley. Any comments or questions on this report? Eileen?
Really, I welcome this report. Obviously, you know, we all know that housing forms the basis of good health and well-being. So it's the foundation which we build the quality of life, and it allows people to age well. It also means that, you know, we form communities. If we've got good housing, that is how we form stable communities, rather than sometimes we see communities where we've got lots of HMOs and landlords. So good quality housing makes a difference in lots of different areas. So I think, you know, the council's vision, it's about forming that foundation and also about the inclusivity that it allows us. So I really welcome the report, and thank you for the officers and cabinet members for giving me to us.
Councillor Healy?
Yeah, I welcome the report. Obviously, we've discussed the strategy before, and this puts it into a planning document so that we can deliver on it. And again, we talked a lot this morning, haven't we, about, you know, about the levelling up, which I think we've shown isn't really levelling up from this government at all. We talked about inequalities, and as Councillor Clear has said, and Councillor Burford, you know, when we're talking about trying to actually address inequalities, things like education, which obviously we've seen there's a you know, a lack of funding of some elements of that service, but also housing are absolutely crucial to reducing inequalities. And I think what this report sets out for me, it's a really good example of our approach, of this council's approach, this administration's approach. We look to understand the needs of our residents. It's very clear, a lot of work gone into really understanding the needs around specialist and supported housing. And then from that, rather than saying that's actually too difficult, we can't deliver that, you know, and cutting services left, right and centre, we then go, that's the need, that's what our residents want and need. And we work back from that to find innovative ways to deliver that. And as Councillor Burford said, we'll be, you know, probably the first council to have such a document that ensures through the planning system we can meet the need for specialist and supported housing, and to me that just enshrines our whole approach to all of our services and supporting our residents.
Councillor Middleton?
Just to say that I really support this. As you know, I work in health and homelessness, and I see on a daily basis the impact of health inequalities on people's housing and the inability to maintain accommodation as a result of their health and wellbeing needs not being met. You know, one of the main causes is relationship breakdowns due to mental health, substance misuse. So, you know, you can't just put people in accommodation and problem solve. So tackling these things and focusing on health and wellbeing is really important in accommodation. I think it's really important.
Thank you, Kelly. Shirley?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, really. And like my colleagues, I absolutely welcome this new housing strategy. It basically puts into print how we're caring for our residents, and we're trying to build really strong neighbourhoods. We're building mixed communities. We're building to the need that is out there. It's making sure that there are homes for vulnerable adults, there are homes for young people. On a personal level, it's great to see that we're providing homes for our care leavers, and I think that's really important. I mean, most of us around the table, we've got children. We know that when our children get to 18, they'll either be going to university, they'll be staying at home. There is a stable transition period for them. Some of the young care leavers across this country, they hit 18, it's like they fall off a cliff and there's no care there for them. That does not happen with this authority, and it's great to see that that housing need is being recognised there. We look after our care leavers till they're at least 25, which is how it should be. We've got adaptive homes for those that need them. New Place, we're providing really good quality homes with the importance of security and tenure, and I think that is the difference with the New Place homes to most of our landlords across the borough. You know, not only is it quality home, but they know that's a home for life if they want it to be. And for all of us, that's what our home needs to be. We need to know that we've got that reassurance of it. Specialist and supportive accommodation. I just think this is all really builds right into our agenda. We do what we say on the tin. We are building a better borough.
Thank you. I think it's to be commended, and I thank Andy and David and Richard and all the officers involved in this. It is, again, another council first, not just for this council, but for across the country, one of the first, if not the first, to bring forward this type of document, and we should all be proud of that. But ultimately, it does go back to market failure, and also goes back to the woeful underfunding of adult social care and the health system, because ultimately you can't fix the NHS without fixing social care. You can't fix social care without having this type of supported accommodation across the borough, and you can't fix the housing crisis without ensuring that people are in the right home at the right time in the right place. And you know, I've just seen some comments on my own council of Facebook around the need for bungalows and the huge demand that we've got. Well, ultimately, the market isn't stepping up to that challenge because of profit margins, and therefore it's up to the likes of Wrekin Housing Group and New Place and other public bodies to be stepping into that market. And we do need a plan from government around this. It all interlinks, really, doesn't it? And the fact that we are, you know, into the 12th year of this government, it is demonstrating that lack of plan and the expensive consequences about not having a plan. And we do need, as a country, to grapple this issue. And I'm glad and I'm very delighted and proud that we are doing our bit here in Telford Wrekin. Bill, you've indicated.
Yes, sorry, I was going to echo pretty much what you just said. It's wonderful we've got this document going forward, and I fully support it, the special planning document. But we're all aware that we've been on the plans board, that developers, because of profitability and you know, they've been able to throw out sometimes the proportions we want in affordable housing. We've put a wonderful papers together on urban greening and biodiversity, but I can see planners going to inspectors saying, well, we can't afford it. And I can see the same thing going on with this, and you've hit the nail on the head. Very often when houses are being built, profit margins primarily, which is what private builders do, that's what they live for. So if they can't make money out of something, they won't voluntarily do it. And now you often find their friends in government manage to let them wheedle out of some of these things and say, we can't make money. I think we have to realise is that, you know, there's still a real place, which I'm glad we're doing with New Place on the board, but there's still a real place out there for social housing. And the government have got to put the money into social housing through the social landlords and everywhere else for these proper properties to be provided for those who really need them. People with extreme needs, you know, the costs could be huge. You know, where are they going to get the funding from? Where is any commercial company going to get the funding from? So I welcome this, but it does need, as you say, a government lead on this to realise that this sort of provision can often only come through the local authorities or the government or social housing.
Thank you, Bill.
Hopefully, if we go into the local plan review, the other thing is that you know, we must be getting the existing housing stock as well, because obviously, you know, people want to stay in their own homes, and therefore, you know, sort of, I'd just like to see a bit more detail on the formula for upgrading existing housing stock.
Thanks, Nigel. I think two good points. I think on the local plan, I think what we're doing through this document is not waiting for the government review of the planning framework. We're getting on and acting now rather than delaying. So this report is in effect supersedes and complementary to the local plan. If we did wait for the local plan to come through, that would be further delay. So we're doing the policy. And on the second point, I think it's a good point, and it is something that Andy and I have spoken to health leaders on, and I'll ask Andy to comment on this at the moment. this has to be seen from the preventative agenda, and it needs the CCG and the STP and the ST, acronyms you've got in the NHS now. You just need them to get on and do some stuff around this, and we have highlighted some very good practice. I mean, things like as simple as, I've seen this work really well elsewhere in the country, a rolling out of grab rails can see significant 70% reduction in falls, which helps the NHS, helps the resident in their home. It means they don't have to move home. Things like removing front door steps, again, a really important thing, and also then the more complex adaptations that you can do. But it does need our health partners to be stepping up to the plate, Andy.
Yeah, yes, it does. I mean, we're quite innovative, I think. Our independent living centre here in Telford is drawing a lot of attention because of the way it's enabling people who do need adaptations and technology to improve their capability of living at home. That's one important aspect. And we do seem to be getting some traction now with the health service in terms of recognising how important that is. I mean, I still think though that it's about how homes being built initially and designed in the right way. The more you can do that, that's the big win, and that's the thing which Councillor Tomlinson was mentioning. Developers won't do that unless they have to, and that's what we wait for government to do. That is even more important than the things we're doing locally, which I applaud. But we really have got to plan ahead, think ahead when it comes to the kind of housing we need in this town. We can do so much ourselves, but government's lead is really important on this.
Thank you, Andy. It's a good discussion. It's been moved, it's been seconded. Everyone in favour? Excellent. Okay, so as I said at the beginning of the meeting, we'll move item 10 forward to item 9, which is the Green Guarantee. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Leader. So this report really reaffirms our commitment to protecting green spaces in the Council's ownership through the Green Guarantee Scheme that was introduced by this administration in 2015. We currently have 200 Green Guarantee sites, and that's equivalent in area to around 680 football pitches. And we're just working through and looking to identify more sites to be designated under the Green Guarantee Scheme, as well as investing £2 million into those green spaces as part of our overall £60 million package to create a greener, cleaner, safer and more enjoyable borough. The report is largely a procedural one to just clarify the approvals process for managing Green Guarantee sites through leases and licences. Several sites that are currently Green Guarantee sites are licensed or leased out to groups, so for example Telford Hornets Rugby Club or Woodside Allotments Association, and currently any renewals of those leases or licences would need to come to Cabinet. Similarly, entering into new agreements which cannot sometimes really help to improve, for example, football pitches by having an agreement with a football club to use a football pitch. They can, if they have an agreement for around 25 years, they can then get grants that then fund those improvements. But we can't, again, any decision to enter into an agreement would need to come to Cabinet, even though the features that qualify the site for a Green Guarantee site would be retained. So the report just seeks to approve delegation to the relevant directors in consultation with myself as Cabinet member. The delegated powers are limited and set out in section 4.7, and just to reassure that this is about management of these green spaces. Any freehold disposal proposals would of course need Cabinet approval. So it's set out in the report, and I move the recommendations. Thank you,
Councillor Healy. Is that seconded? Thank you, Irene. Any questions or comments from Cabinet members? Councillor Tomlinson?
Yes, I welcome this report. I think it's been wonderful to have this Green Guarantee Scheme, in particular, and also with the nature reserves we have alongside it. What I would like to say, though, is where we have nature reserves, which are extremely successful and often drawing an awful lot of volunteers to them, one technical point I'd like to look at is where we've got green spaces of a significant size, which are fairly near to some of these nature reserves. It would be lovely if those could just be adopted into nature reserves. There's a couple I know in Shawbert. I've got a lovely stretch of ancient woodland, another large green space. and people talk about what we call environmental corridors and wildlife corridors. And I just wondered if it could be considered at some future stage where there are neighbouring green spaces, could be adopted into nature reserves, and everyone around the table knows once it's into a nature reserve, it gives it even more than in an open green space. But I'll talk specifically about one from my walk, Councillor Healy, at some later stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I'll come back to Carol in a moment. I'll just invite Nigel in, but it's almost like you've been listening to some of our meetings, Bill, so don't worry about that. Nigel?
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like a procedural thing. I just wondered whether or not, because there was an issue previously with the green guarantee in the fields for community use, and they're now going to be leased back to them, even though they were given to the community. So would that mean then that it would just go ahead without any input or monitoring of it?
So can you pick up Bill's Nigel point?
Sure, yes. So in terms of our local nature reserves, we are looking at where we can designate new local nature reserves, but also look into some of those extensions. And one of the reasons for the Green Guarantee scheme was that to have a designated local nature reserve, that does have to meet a certain criteria set out, by Natural England. So if we don't meet that criteria, then we have to find another way of protecting that green space. So where we can meet the criteria, then of course we will be designating more local nature reserves. So happy to discuss any areas that you're specifically looking at, Bill. In relation to Tees Drive in Priorslee, obviously that's a matter that's been through planning, and you sit on planning committee. The open space is still there. Part of it will have some school use, but then we'll also have community use. The remaining land remains open. We're investing further into that green space in relation to the play area, skate park, and five-a-side pitch. So the purpose of the site, it remains a green space that is used by the public. So it still is a green guarantee site.
Excellent. So that's sorry, no.
You would pay for an allotment, and allotments are currently within the green guarantee site.
Or the lease of football pitch. Right. So it's been moved. It's been seconded. Everybody in favour? That's lovely. So I'll withdraw at this point, given my council nomination to the Wrekin Housing Group, and hand over to Lee to deal with the remaining items for the agenda.
Okay, item 9 is a report that I will present, a very brief report, essentially a technical report that asks the Cabinet to note the progress made on the Glebe Street site by Wrekin Housing Group, which I think in terms of investment is welcomed right across the community and right across the political spectrum, particularly in Wellington. But essentially this is focused on that power that's available to the Council to aid Wrekin Housing Group, an external partner, to help them with that continued regeneration of that large part of the south-east approach to Wellington Centre. I'd just like to move the recommendations. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Middleton. Any comments from opposition, Nigel?
Well, I mean, the only thing is obviously we desperately need to do it, the sooner the better. I'm just a bit confused with the connection between Glebe Street and New College site, because they're sort of half a mile apart.
Well, not quite half a mile apart, a lot closer than that, but it's all part of the same regeneration package, and I think money unlocked from the LEP, significant amount of investment, I think once in a generation opportunity for that particular area, which has got its unique challenges, as we all know. Councillor Tomlinson?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carter. I just wanted to say I'm generally in favour of this because it needs redeveloping, but just a sensitivity for any potential tenants that are currently in some of these sites, which we're going to, as it were, have compulsory purchase orders placed upon them, so that we're sensitive to the needs of those residents that are actually living in that accommodation at the moment, if there are any.
Yep. Thanks, and again, that's something we obviously closely monitor as a council and concerned about as a cabinet as well. We share that same. I think it's fair to say that as an authority, we work very closely with the housing group to make sure the processes and procedures as part of this CPO are followed, but also that Wrekin Housing Group do offer that care and attention to existing residents. I think this is a bit of a moving feast. There's a number of properties at a number that's specified within the report, but actually it probably end up being less than that, I believe. So I've had, it's been moved, seconded, all those in favour? Okay, that's agreed then. And I think that brings the meeting to an end. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.